The laughter came first, sharp, dry, and mean as spurs scraping wood. Elian Wade stood in the center of Silverbend's saloon, cheeks burning, while a circle of ranch hands jeered. The gold watch, his late father's, was gone, lost in a single foolish hand of cards. The saloon air smelled of whiskey and dust, heavy with the hum of a piano that played something cruel. "Guess your daddy's time ran out," one of them sneered, dangling an empty whiskey glass like a mock trophy. The watch had been his father's dying gift, a symbol of pride from a man who once ran cattle across 3 states. Now it was gone, traded for silence and shame. Elian's fingers twitched over his empty belt holster. He wasn't a gunfighter, not really. Just a boy trying to prove he could be more than his mistakes. But every set of eyes around that smoky room said otherwise. Weak, foolish, beaten. He tried to speak, but his voice came out dry as prairie dust. "I'll win it back." That only made them laugh harder. One ranch hand, Dal Craven, broad-shouldered and mean as a kicked mule, stepped closer. "You win. You're barely man enough to hold that drink." The laughter thickened, echoing against the timber walls. Elian's hands trembled, not from fear but from humiliation too sharp to swallow. He could still see his father's weathered face in his mind, hear the old man's voice. "A Wade keeps his word, and what's his stays his." But right now, what was his? Just the shame of losing everything his father ever taught him to men who didn't care. Outside, the desert wind howled through the cracked windows like it, too, was laughing. Dal flicked a coin across the table. "Tell you what, boy. I'll give you one chance to earn it back. You ride down to Red Hollow, fetch my winnings from the postmaster, and maybe, I'll think about returning your watch." The room went still. Red Hollow was a 2-day ride through outlaw country, a place even seasoned men avoided after sundown. Elian hesitated, then nodded once. Pride was a heavier burden than fear. "I'll bring it," he said quietly. Dal smirked. "If the coyotes don't eat you first." More laughter followed, and someone poured a drink in mock salute. Elian turned and pushed through the swinging doors into the biting desert night. Behind him the piano played on, mocking his footsteps. The cold air stung his face like judgment. Above, the stars burned cold and silent. He walked toward his horse, an aging sorrel named Bramble, tied outside the hitching post. The night smelled of dust and iron. He untied the reins, hands still shaking, then paused. Through the saloon window, he saw Dal holding the watch, spinning it on its chain like a toy. Every turn of that gold case was another twist of the knife. Elian clenched his jaw and mounted up. The wind was picking up from the north, carrying with it the scent of rain or trouble. Somewhere behind the storm clouds, lightning flashed. He took one last look at Silverbend's crooked sign swaying in the wind. "I'll come back for it," he whispered. But even he didn't believe it yet. The desert stretched before him, endless and merciless. The moon rose high as he rode, a pale coin floating above the plains. Each hoofbeat echoed like a ticking clock, the ghost of the watch he'd lost. He imagined his father's disappointment riding beside him, silent and heavy. The road to Red Hollow was long, and so was the shadow of his shame. Yet somewhere deep in the distance, past the horizon of his pride, another shadow was waiting, a man whose name still made even killers pause before reaching for their guns. That man was said to have drawn faster than lightning and never missed. Folks whispered his name with a kind of reverence and fear. Elian didn't know it yet, but their paths were about to cross in a way that would change everything the West remembered about honor. By dawn, the wind had died, leaving the land quiet as prayer. Elian rode through the flat wastes, eyes heavy, the reins loose in his hands. Dust clung to his coat, and his lips were cracked from thirst. The trail to Red Hollow cut through a canyon where rocks leaned inward like ancient teeth. Bramble's hooves clopped softly on the dry ground. He'd been riding all night, chasing a chance to win back his father's watch, but something in his gut twisted. Up ahead, smoke curled above the ridge. He slowed, squinting through the light. A wagon lay overturned, the wheels shattered, one mule still struggling to rise. The smell of burned wood and gunpowder lingered. Elian dismounted, drawing the small revolver he barely knew how to use. "Hello!" His voice bounced back from the stone. No answer. Just the whisper of wind through canyon cracks. He stepped closer, eyes scanning. A man lay beside the wreck, face down, blood soaking into the dirt. Another figure sat slumped against a boulder. Alive, barely. The man's hat was tipped low. His shirt torn and dark with blood. When Elian knelt, the stranger's eyes opened, cold gray, sharp as cut glass. "You alone, boy?" His voice was low, gravelly, yet carried weight like a lawman's order. Elian nodded. "Was. Till now." The stranger's hand moved toward his hip, but not for his wound, for his gun. His draw was smooth, even in pain, and the barrel gleamed. "Don't reach for yours again," he said quietly. Elian froze, heart pounding. I was just checking if you were dead." The man coughed, a dry laugh escaping his throat. "Almost." He holstered the weapon. "Name's Holt. Reddan Holt." Elian had heard the name before. Everyone had. The man who'd shot 3 bandits in one draw. The one who walked away from 12 duels and buried none of his own. They said his eyes could measure the wind before he fired, and that he never smiled after sundown. Now here he was, bleeding in the dust like any mortal. Elian tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against Holt's side. "Ambush." Holt nodded once. "Road thieves. Took my coin and left me to bleed." He looked the boy over. "You're no thief." Elian hesitated. "Lost something. Trying to win it back." Holt studied him a long moment, the faintest spark of recognition in his expression, like he'd once known that same kind of shame. "Get me to Red Hollow," Holt said finally. "You'll get your watch. Maybe more." They made camp beneath a split boulder as the sun sank low. Elian built a fire, small and cautious. Holt lay back against his saddle, breathing shallow. "You ever draw that iron you carry?" Holt asked, eyes half open. Elian shook his head. "Only once. Missed." Holt chuckled softly. "Missing keeps you alive sometimes." The firelight flickered against his face, cutting harsh lines into the years there. He was older than Elian had thought. Late 40s, maybe, but carved from something that didn't age the same as other men. "Your father's watch," Holt said quietly. "Was it worth dying for?" Elian looked into the fire. "It's all I have of him." Holt nodded. "Then you don't let men like Craven keep it. You take it back clean, or you die trying." When morning came, the horizon blazed gold, painting the desert with long shadows. Holt was already on his feet, pale but steady. He'd cleaned his wound with whiskey, wrapped it himself, and mounted without a word. "You'll ride with me," he said. There's a way to Red Hollow that bandits don't use. Through Salt Gap. Elian climbed onto Bramble, feeling something strange stir in his chest. The man who'd just ordered him could have shot him dead the night before. Instead, he was offering him a path forward, and maybe a lesson in what it meant to stand for something again. As they rode toward the horizon, the first light caught Holt's revolver, and Elian saw the engraving on the handle. For mercy. He wondered what kind of gunman carved that word into his weapon. He didn't ask yet. The sun was merciless that day, hanging white and heavy over the land. The trail to Salt Gap shimmered like glass, twisting between walls of pale rock. Holt rode ahead in silence, one hand near his holster, the other gripping the reins. His wound had stiffened, but he didn't let it show. Elian followed, sweat burning his eyes. His father's empty watch chain tucked inside his vest like a reminder of what shame cost. The canyon narrowed the deeper they went, the air turning still, no sound but the creak of saddles and the scuff of hooves on stone. Holt slowed his horse, scanning the ridges above. "Bandits favor high ground," he muttered. "If they're here, they'll wait till we're boxed in." Elian swallowed hard. "And if they come?" Holt's eyes stayed forward. "Then you'll learn to draw." Hours passed before the canyon widened again. Bones of old wagons lay scattered where the ground dipped. Holt dismounted and crouched, running his fingers through the dirt. "Tracks," he said. "Fresh." Elian looked around, pulse quickening. Craven's men. Holt didn't answer right away. Maybe. Or someone meaner. He rose slowly, scanning the far cliffs. The wind carried a faint whistle, then a shot cracked from above. A bullet kissed the rock inches from Elian's head. Holt didn't flinch. "Down!" he barked. They dove behind a fallen cart as dust exploded around them. Another shot rang out, echoing sharp through the canyon. Holt leaned from cover, sighting the ridge. 2 shooters. Maybe 3. They're testing range. Elian's breath trembled. "What do we do?" Holt looked at him once, calm as a man ordering coffee. "We make them believe we're ghosts." Holt's revolver barked twice, 2 sharp flashes in the heat haze. Both shots hit rock, but that didn't matter. The echoes bounced between the canyon walls, turning one gun into many. "Reload," Holt said. "Keep moving." Elian obeyed, firing blindly into the cliffs as Holt shifted position. His movements so smooth they almost looked rehearsed. The ambushers hesitated, unsure how many they faced. One voice shouted a curse, then silence. Holt tilted his head. "They're falling back." Elian blinked. "How do you know?" "Because they're smarter than they look," Holt said, holstering his weapon. "And cowards know when death's listening." He stood, dusting himself off. "Come on, boy." Before they remember their pride. They mounted up and pushed on. The air smelled of gunpowder and fear. Elian couldn't tell which clung closer to his skin. By dusk, the canyon opened onto a salt flat that stretched forever, glowing silver under the sinking sun. Wind swept across the plain, stinging their faces with fine white dust. Holt slowed to a trot. "Salt Gap," he said. "Looks quiet. That's the lie it tells." Elian glanced at him. "You've been here before." Holt's expression darkened. "Once. Long time ago." He didn't say more. The silence between them grew heavy, filled only by the sound of hooves crunching salt. Elian wanted to ask what Holt had lost out here, but something about the man's posture, rigid, distant, made him hold his tongue. In the distance, the ruins of an old outpost appeared. A half-broken windmill, a few shacks leaning like drunkards. Holt nodded toward it. "We'll camp there. Tomorrow we ride to Red Hollow." As the night settled cold and clear, the fire between them burned low. Holt sat polishing his revolver, the flicker of flame dancing on the silver engraving. "For mercy." Elian watched him, curiosity winning over caution. "Why's it say that?" he asked softly. Holt's eyes didn't lift. "Because mercy's the hardest shot to take." Elian frowned. "You mean sparing someone?" Holt shook his head. "No. Living after you've spared him." He looked across the fire, his face half in shadow. "You're chasing a watch. But that chain around your neck, what it really carries is your father's pride. You lose that, and no gold on earth will buy it back." Elian sat quiet, the desert wind whispering through the ruins. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote called, a lonely sound that carried like a warning. The sky burned crimson as they rode into Red Hollow, the kind of color that made the world look half on fire. The town crouched between two cliffs, small but restless, a mix of shanties, saloons, and silence that looked suspicious. Holt's horse snorted as they passed a hanging sign reading, "Welcome to Red Hollow. Mind your business." Folks paused to stare. A tall gunman in a dust-worn coat, and a boy too proud to look scared. Holt tipped his hat once, eyes sweeping the street. "Keep close," he murmured. Elian followed, feeling every stare like a stone on his back. At the far end of town stood the Copper Spur, a saloon painted red as blood. Holt dismounted, tying his reins to the post. "We ask. We listen. We leave," he said. "No drinking, no boasting." Elian nodded, though his throat was dry as bone. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, sweat, and cheap whiskey. A piano wheezed somewhere in the corner, trying to remember a tune. Men sat at tables, low voices and heavy eyes following Holt as he walked to the bar. The bartender, a broad man with one ear missing, polished a glass with a rag that looked dirtier than the floor. Holt placed a silver coin down. "Name's Holt. Looking for a man rides with Craven's lot. Carries a gold watch that don't belong to him." The room quieted like someone blew out a candle. The bartender's eyes flicked toward a shadowed table in the back, then back to Holt. "You best leave that watch buried, mister," he said slowly. "It's cursed to the touch." Holt's jaw tightened. "Maybe," he said. "But the boy here's got a claim to it." A man rose from the shadowed table, slow and deliberate. He wore a black duster, his beard streaked gray, his left hand missing 2 fingers. A scar split his lip, making every word look like a sneer. "You the man a skin about Craven," he drawled. Holt didn't turn. "Depends who's a skin back." The man's eyes gleamed. "Name's Pike. Craven's second." The whole saloon shifted in tension, chairs scraping quietly. Pike's hand rested near his belt. "That watch," he said, "ain't for sale, and it sure ain't for boys." Elian took a step forward before he could stop himself. "It was my father's," he blurted. The room went still again. Pike chuckled low. "Then your daddy should have held it tighter." Holt's hand moved to his gun, but Pike only smiled wider. "Not today, old man. Craven's got it. You'll find him past the dry river, up near the Devil's Spine. If you make it that far." He tipped his hat and walked out, boots echoing across the floor. Holt waited until the door swung shut before speaking. "Finish your water," he told Elian quietly. "We ride at first light." The boy clenched his fists. "Why didn't you shoot him?" Holt looked down at him, expression unreadable. "Because some men die better when they think they'll live." He dropped a few more coins on the counter and turned for the door. Outside, the street had gone empty. Only the wind moved, stirring dust like whispers. They crossed to the stable where the horses waited. Holt checked his saddle straps while Elian stared at the sky, now bruised purple with the coming night. "You ever kill a man?" Elian asked softly. Holt's hands paused. "Once." "Did he deserve it?" Holt met the boy's eyes. "Most folks do, if you listen long enough to their story." Then he mounted up, voice low. "Sleep with one eye open, boy. Red Hollow don't like visitors." That night, they camped just beyond the edge of town, near a dead mesquite tree that looked like it was praying for rain. The stars came out cold and sharp, the kind that made silence louder. Holt sat apart, sharpening his knife by the fire. Elian lay awake, replaying Pike's words in his mind. "Then your daddy should have held it tighter." The insult burned deeper than any wound. He wanted to prove himself, to make Holt see he wasn't just a boy chasing ghosts. A coyote cried somewhere beyond the rocks, and Holt looked up. "You hear that?" he said quietly. Elian frowned. "What?" "Hoofbeats," Holt said, rising. "Light. Careful. Someone's tracking us." In the darkness beyond the firelight, something shifted. Just a flicker, but enough to make the hairs on Elian's neck stand. Holt drew his revolver without a sound. "Looks like Craven's boys don't sleep either." The dawn came gray and mean, dragging a wind that smelled of dust and gun oil. Holt and Elian rode through a field of white rock that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Ahead, the land rose into sharp ridges, the devil's spine. Nothing lived out there but vultures and ghosts. Holt slowed his horse, studying the narrow pass winding upward between the cliffs. "They'll be waiting," he said quietly. "Craven never lets a trail stay empty." Elian adjusted his reins, nerves twisting in his gut. "Then why ride into it?" Holt's eyes stayed on the rocks. "Because the only way past a devil is through him." He checked his weapon, spun the cylinder once, and nudged his horse forward. The wind hissed low through the canyon, carrying the faint rattle of spurs, but not theirs. Halfway up the trail, the first shot came. It hit Holt's hat clean off his head, sending it spinning into the dirt. "Down!" he barked, diving behind a boulder as bullets ripped through the air. Elian hit the ground beside him, heart pounding. "They've got high ground," he shouted. Holt didn't answer. He peered around the rock, counting shadows on the ridgeline. 4, maybe 5 men. "Cover me," he ordered. "I'm flanking left." Before Elian could protest, Holt rolled from cover and dashed toward another cluster of rocks, moving with impossible precision. Bullets struck sparks off the stone around him, but he never hesitated. Elian aimed his father's revolver and fired, barely seeing through the smoke and terror. One of the shadows jerked and fell, tumbling down the slope. Holt's voice cut through the chaos. "Good shot. Keep their eyes up." For a long minute, the canyon boiled with gunfire. Then silence. Only the moan of wind through the cliffs remained. Holt rose slowly, scanning the ridge. "2 left," he muttered. Elian's hands shook, sweat running into his eyes. "You think Craven's here?" Holt didn't look back. Not yet. He likes to watch first. The boy frowned. Watch what? How you bleed, Holt said coldly. Before Elian could answer, a movement flickered above. A man in a long coat stepping into view, his rifle gleaming like a serpent in the sun. Holt fired first. The shot echoed off the cliffs, and the man pitched forward, tumbling like a sack of stones. The other shooter panicked and bolted. Holt didn't chase. He holstered his revolver and looked at Elian. That's how devils pray, he said. With bullets instead of words. They climbed higher until the canyon opened into a plateau ringed with dead brush. From up there, the desert stretched endless, a sea of sand and ruin. Holt pointed toward a cluster of rocks in the distance, black and jagged against the horizon. That's where Craven's hiding, he said. The spine's heart. Elian swallowed. And you've fought him before. Holt nodded once. Years back. He ran with my brother then. Took my mercy and sold it for gold. The words hung heavy. Elian didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. They dismounted, moving on foot through the thin grass and stone. Every sound felt louder than it should. The crunch of boots, the rattle of canteens. The closer they got, the colder the air seemed to turn, like the land itself didn't want them there. Near a rock ledge they found something strange. A small fire still burning, and beside it, a man's hat pinned to the ground with a knife. Holt knelt studying it. Craven's calling card, he said. Means he knows we're coming. Elian's throat went dry. So what now? Holt stood, eyes narrowing toward the horizon. Now, he said, we let him make the first mistake. They set up behind a low ridge, rifles ready, every nerve stretched tight. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then, from somewhere beyond the rocks, came a voice, low, mocking, familiar. Holt Mercer, it drawled. You still chasing ghosts and orphans? Holt's shoulders stiffened. He rose slowly, stepping into the open. Across the clearing stood Craven, tall, lean, his black coat flapping in the wind. A gold watch gleamed on his chest like stolen sunlight. Been a long time, Craven said. Too long, Holt replied. The wind howled across the plateau, whipping dust around the two men like a circle drawn in blood. Craven stood easy, one hand resting on his revolver, the other dangling that gold watch from its chain. The light flashed off it like mockery. You came far for a trinket, Holt, he said, grinning wide enough to show the chip in his front tooth. Holt's voice was calm but cold. That trinket belonged to a man who died honest. Craven laughed, a sound without warmth. Honest men die poor. I'm just helping his memory travel in better company. Elian's fists clenched where he crouched behind the ridge, every muscle screaming to act. But Holt didn't move. Let the boy go, Craven went on. You walk away, and I'll even let you keep your life. Maybe. Holt's gaze didn't waver. You always did mistake mercy for weakness. Craven tilted his head. And you always paid for it. The two men stood locked in silence, every heartbeat louder than the wind. Holt's voice broke at first, low and steady. You're running lean, Craven. I took your shooters in the canyon. Craven smirked. You think I'd waste my best men on the trail? He snapped his fingers. From behind the rocks rose three figures, rifles drawn, eyes glinting under the brim of their hats. Elian's breath caught. Holt didn't flinch. So that's the bargain, Holt said. 3 cowards against one old man. Craven stepped forward. No, Holt. It's 4. He nodded toward the shadows, and another figure emerged. Woman. Her hair braided in silver, her coat long and worn, a scar cutting across her cheek. Elian's eyes widened. Is that? Holt's voice went tight. Mercy. The woman's gaze met his. You left me for dead, she said. Now I get to return the favor. Craven smiled wider. I told you she'd show. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Holt took one slow step forward. You ain't got to do this, Mercy. Her voice cracked just slightly. You think I'd come all this way to forgive you? The rifles lifted in unison. Craven twirled the watch on its chain, taunting. Maybe we settle this the old way, he said. High noon tomorrow. You, me, and the boy's legacy. Winner keeps the watch, and the stories. Holt's expression was carved from stone. And if I refuse? Craven shrugged. Then we take it off your corpse today. Holt's hand hovered near his gun, but Elian whispered from behind. Don't. Please. Craven's eyes narrowed, catching the sound. Ah. The boy. He flicked the watch toward Holt, letting it swing like a pendulum. Better keep it safe. Tomorrow you'll be watching it fall with you. When the outlaws rode off, the silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Holt stood motionless for a long while, eyes fixed on where Mercy had vanished into the dust. Elian approached carefully. Who was she? He asked. Holt's voice was quiet, roughened by old pain. She was my partner once. We cleared this land together, till I chose the law over her blood. He sat down on a rock, the gold watch glinting at his boots. Craven turned her against me. Told her I sold her name for bounty. Elian frowned. Did you? Holt didn't look up. I did what I thought was right. That's worse sometimes. The boy sat beside him, watching the fading light. Then tomorrow, Holt nodded slowly. Tomorrow, I finish what Mercy started. The wind carried the echo of that word. Mercy, like a curse whispered twice. That night, they camped at the base of the spine. The fire burned small, their shadows long on the stone. Holt cleaned his revolver in silence, the rhythm steady, ritualistic. Elian stared at the watch, its cracked glass catching the flame. You could walk away, the boy said quietly. Let it die here. Holt didn't answer for a long moment. Then, if I run now, he owns every man I failed before. And every boy after you. He glanced at Elian. You came for a father's honor. Tomorrow you'll see what that costs. The boy nodded, his throat tight. The night stretched endless around them. Coyotes cried. The stars flickered sharp. Holt laid down the revolver beside him and whispered, almost to himself. At noon Mercy dies. The sun rose clean and cruel, slicing gold light through the canyons. By noon the world had gone silent. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of insects. Just heat, dust and breath. Holt stood in the clearing with his coat off, hat low, revolver resting easy in his hand. Across from him, Craven waited with that same wolf's grin, coat flapping in the hot wind. Between them, the gold watch hung from a branch, ticking faintly, its chain swaying like a clock counting down to death. Mercy stood behind Craven, her face unreadable, rifle in hand. Elian watched from the ridge above, heart hammering so hard he thought it might echo. Holt didn't look back. When it starts, he'd told him, don't move. Not even if I fall. Now all that mattered was the space between two men and a single breath. Craven's smile widened. "Ain't it fitting," he said. "The man who preached mercy, meeting his end under a devil's sun." Holt didn't speak. His eyes were calm, fixed, steady. Craven stepped closer, boots crunching the dry soil. "You should have stayed gone," he taunted. "You could have been a legend." Holt's jaw flexed. "I am." The word came soft but sharp enough to cut. The seconds stretched thin. Then Craven's hand twitched. Two shots cracked at once, thunder splitting the desert. Dust leapt from the ground. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Then Craven staggered back, blood blooming through his shirt. Holt's hat flew off from a near miss. His shoulder grazed and smoking. The gold watch dropped from the branch, landing between them with a dull, final thud. Both men stared at it, one bleeding, one barely standing. "Finish it," Craven rasped, his grin fading into a snarl. Holt stepped closer, gun still raised. "You don't get to ask favors from ghosts," he said. But before he could fire again, a single shot rang out from behind. Holt froze. The bullet had missed, but not by much. It struck the dirt beside his boot. Mercy stood with her rifle leveled, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Don't," she said. Craven turned toward her, shock twisting his face. "What the hell?" "No more blood," she whispered. "Not for you. Not for him." Craven lunged for his gun, but Mercy was faster. Her rifle cracked once. Craven jerked, fell hard, his blood soaking into the dust that had seen too much of it already. Holt lowered his weapon slowly. Mercy's hands shook as she dropped the rifle, her voice barely a whisper. "You left me in the dark, Holt. But I found my way back." For a long moment neither spoke. Only the ticking of the watch filled the stillness. Holt bent down, picked it up, and held it out to her. "You earned this more than me." She shook her head, tears tracing the dirt on her face. "No. Give it to the boy. Let something good come of it." Holt looked toward Elian on the ridge. The boy was already running down, eyes wide, breathless with relief. Holt crouched, placing the watch in his hands. "Your father's time is yours again," he said softly. Elian stared at the cracked glass, the faint pulse of the second hand still moving. "You didn't kill him," he whispered. Holt looked up at the sun. "No. Mercy did." The three of them stood in silence. The outlaw, the gunman, and the boy who'd carried both vengeance and hope in his heart. By the time the sun dipped low, they buried Craven under the red stones of the plateau. No words were spoken over him. The wind carried enough of them. Holt tied his coat tighter, the wound in his shoulder dark with dried blood. Mercy stood beside him, eyes on the horizon. "You'll ride east?" she asked. Holt nodded. "There's peace in the plains. Maybe I'll find some." She almost smiled. "You won't." He met her gaze. "Maybe not." Elian held the watch close to his chest, its faint ticking a promise. As they turned to leave, a gust of wind swept across the spine, scattering dust over Craven's grave until it vanished into the earth, like he'd never been. The boy looked back once, the sun flaring behind the rocks. "Mr. Holt," he said quietly, "was mercy worth it?" Holt's eyes softened. "Always. But it costs more than gold." The morning after the duel broke cool and pale, a thin veil of mist rising from the desert floor. The land that had seen death now looked almost holy in the soft light. Holt saddled his horse with one arm, wincing but never slowing. Mercy helped tighten the straps, her hands steady though her eyes looked far away. Elian stood nearby, holding the gold watch. He'd polished it clean through the night, rubbing away the dirt and blood until the glass shone again. Holt looked at him. "You keep that," he said. "Not because it's gold, but because time don't stop for grief." Elian nodded slowly, tucking it into his vest. The boy looked different now, older somehow. The wide-eyed fear was gone, replaced with something sharper, quieter. Mercy glanced between them. "Where will you go?" she asked. Holt adjusted his hat. "East. Toward the plains. There's talk of peace out there. Maybe I'll believe it when I see it." They rode for hours, leaving Devil's Spine behind like a bad dream that couldn't follow daylight. The land began to soften. Less stone, more grass, a distant shimmer of river. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, like an old song that didn't need words. Elian broke it first. "You really think peace is out there?" Holt smiled faintly. "Peace ain't a place, boy. It's a road. You just keep ridin' till it fits." Mercy laughed once, quiet but real. Coming from the man who spent half his life chasing ghosts. Holt shrugged. "Even ghosts stop running when the wind changes." They crested a ridge overlooking a stretch of wild prairie. Herds moved like shadows far below. For a moment all three just watched, the world wide open in every direction. Elian whispered, "I think my pa would have liked this." Holt's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. "He'd be proud you came this far." By afternoon they reached a fork in the trail. One path bent north, winding toward the mountains. The other dipped south toward a river and the faint shape of a town. Mercy reined in her horse. "This is where I split," she said softly. Elian blinked. "You're leaving?" She nodded. "Got debts to settle that ain't measured in money. Folks think I'm dead. I'd rather show 'em I'm not." Holt gave her a long look. "You'll find what you're after." Mercy's smile was sad but certain. "I'll find something to." She reached down, pulling a small silver locket from her coat and pressing it into Elian's hand. "Your pa once gave this to me, back when men still believed in promises. It belongs with you now." The boy hesitated, then clutched it tight. "Thank you." Mercy turned her horse. "Don't thank me. Just live better than we did." She tipped her hat to Holt, her eyes glimmering. "Try not to die honest." Then she rode north, her figure shrinking against the horizon until she was gone. They rode on until sundown. The land glowed orange, the air thick with the scent of sage and smoke. Holt and Elian made camp near a creek, the sound of running water soothing after so much silence. As they sat by the fire, the boy studied the locket in his palm. "You think she'll be all right?" he asked. Holt stared into the flames. "Mercy's like a storm, never safe but always true." Elian nodded, then leaned back, staring up at the darkening sky. "I used to think my pa's watch was cursed," he said. "But now it just feels right. Like time gave it back." Holt smiled faintly. "Maybe it did. Some debts get paid in ways we don't expect." A coyote called in the distance, and the sound didn't feel lonely this time. The boy yawned, drifting toward sleep. Holt sat watching the stars, whispering under his breath, "Time's got a funny way of forgivin' what bullets can't." At dawn, the plains stretched endless before them. The horizon glowed gold, as if the whole world was reborn. Holt mounted up, his shoulder bandaged. his spirit steadier than it had been in years. Elian climbed into the saddle beside him, the gold watch ticking quietly in his vest, the locket glinting at his throat. "What now?" he asked. Holt tipped his hat against the sun. "Now we ride till we find a place where the wind don't carry names." The boy grinned. "That sounds like forever." Holt smiled back. "Then we best get started." Together they rode east, two silhouettes fading into the light, the trail behind them already swallowing their tracks. The desert wind carried the faint echo of their laughter, low, real and free. Somewhere far behind, a gold watch kept ticking. Not for vengeance, not for grief, just for time and the souls that finally learned how to ride with it. The town of Silverbend had almost forgotten the name Holt Kincaid when Mercy rode back through its main street 6 weeks later. Dust trailed her horse like smoke from a fire that wouldn't die. The townsfolk stopped and stared, whispering like ghosts afraid of being seen. She looked different, stronger, harder, as if she'd walked through her own grave and climbed out again. A scar traced her cheek like a pale memory of a knife. She dismounted outside the saloon, the same one where Elian's humiliation began. The same swinging doors, same creak in the floorboard where shame once echoed. Inside, a new man sat at the table where Davis Tutt used to play. Sharp suit, darker smile, and a silver pocket watch that wasn't his. Mercy's voice cut through the murmurs. "That watch don't belong to you." The man looked up, grinning. "Ain't that what they all say?" She stepped forward, her boots thudding like judgment. "Not all of them mean it." The man stood slowly, revealing a star pinned to his chest. "Sheriff. A new kind. Lawman by title, outlaw by blood." "Lady," he said, brushing the brim of his hat, "you might have survived out there, but this town's changed. There's new order now." Mercy's eyes didn't flinch. "Order built on stolen time ain't law, it's rot." The saloon went quiet except for the ticking of the gold watch on his vest. She could feel every second pass, sharp as a blade. "You kill the boy?" she asked. The sheriff smirked. "He left with Kincaid. Heard they're long gone east. Probably dead by now." For a heartbeat, Mercy said nothing. Then her hand moved. Faster than breath, faster than regret. The sheriff's glass shattered, whiskey spilling like blood. The room froze. "You got one chance," she whispered. "Tell me where you got that watch." His smile vanished. "From a man they buried without his name." Mercy's gaze darkened. "Then you just dug your own." By the time she rode out of Silverbend, the sheriff's badge hung from her saddle horn, and the gold watch was back where it belonged. The town didn't follow. They just watched her vanish down the trail, afraid to even whisper her name. 2 days later, she found Holt and Elian camped beside the Arkansas River. The boy jumped to his feet when he saw her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mercy!" She smiled faintly. "In the flesh." Holt stood, his face unreadable. "Didn't figure I'd see you again." She tossed the badge at his feet. "Your law's still rotten." He studied her. "You killed him." Mercy's jaw tightened. "He killed plenty more before me." Holt nodded once, no judgment in his eyes. "Then it's done." Elian looked between them. "You brought the watch." She reached into her coat and handed it over. "I don't carry time anymore, kid. It carries me." The boy clutched it close, his eyes shimmering. "You came back." Mercy's voice softened. "Some debts don't let you rest." That night, the three sat around the fire like before, but something in the air had changed. The land was still wild, but the silence was no longer cruel. Holt poured whiskey into 3 tin cups. "To the dead who gave us reason," he said. Mercy lifted hers. And to the living who keep it. Elian's voice trembled slightly. And to the ones still finding their way. They drank. The fire popped, sparks rising into the black sky like souls escaping judgment. Mercy leaned back, staring into the flames. "Funny thing about time," she said. "It don't forgive, but it forgets. Maybe that's enough." Holt nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." The boy smiled faintly, winding the gold watch once more. It ticked steady, no longer heavy with grief but pulsing like a heartbeat. Mercy's hand brushed the locket around his neck. "Your pa'd be proud," she whispered. Elian met her gaze. "So would yours." Her eyes flickered with something unspoken, maybe guilt, maybe grace, but she didn't look away. When dawn came, they rode east together again, 3 souls bound by something deeper than blood. The trail ahead gleamed with dew, the sky streaked in soft gold. Holt led, Mercy followed, Elian between them, the desert wind at their backs. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Somewhere behind them, Silverbend woke to rumors. Of a woman with a scar and a stare cold as the barrel of a gun, of a man who'd once tamed devils, and a boy who carried a watch that never stopped ticking. Legends grow easy in the West, but this one felt different. It wasn't about vengeance or fame. It was about time, how it breaks, heals, and comes full circle. As the sun climbed, Mercy looked at Holt and smiled for the first time in years. "What now?" she asked. He tipped his hat. "Now we stop runnin' from ghosts." She laughed softly. "And if they catch us?" Holt grinned. "Then they'll have to keep up." The dawn broke sharp and golden across the plains, the kind of morning that smelled of endings and beginnings all at once. Elian rode between Mercy and Holt, the sound of the gold watch ticking faintly against his chest. Each click echoed like a heartbeat, steady, alive, forgiven. They'd been on the trail for 3 days since leaving Silverbend, heading east toward a quiet ridge called Widow's Bluff, where Holt said the land was clean and the sky never lied. Mercy hadn't spoken much, but her eyes softened more with every mile. The wind tugged at her hat, her scar catching light like the edge of a promise. Holt's voice finally broke the silence. "When we hit the bluff, we'll stop runnin'." Mercy nodded. "You think time lets you stop?" Holt chuckled low. "Not time. Just men." The boy smiled faintly. "And women." Mercy's lips curled. "We make time stop when we have to." The 3 laughed softly, their laughter carried by the wind across the endless, forgiving plain. By noon they reached the ridge. From there, the land stretched far as the soul could dream, rolling fields of gold grass and a river glinting below like a ribbon of light. Mercy dismounted, running her fingers through the dry earth. "Feels alive," she murmured. Holt nodded. "Everything buried finds its way back if you let it." He turned to Elian. "Your pa once said this spot was holy. Not the church kind, just quiet enough to hear yourself think." The boy gazed out at the horizon, his eyes wide with a kind of awe only the young still carry. "Can we stay here?" Holt smiled faintly. "If we do, we build right." Mercy's hand brushed the colt at her hip. "And we keep it clean." Holt looked toward her. "You ever think about settlin' down?" She laughed once, dry and warm. "Not till the land stops movin'." Her eyes met his for a moment that stretched too long, filled with everything they'd never said. That night, they lit a small fire under a sky thick with stars. The watch ticked between them, bright as the day it was stolen. Elian traced the engraving on its back, his father's initials, while Mercy hummed a low tune, something from a forgotten place. Holt leaned back, hat tilted, voice soft. "Funny, ain't it? How the worst things lead us to what we needed most. Mercy's gaze stayed on the flames. Pain's a teacher if you live long enough to listen. The boy looked up. What did it teach you? She smiled faintly. That mercy ain't forgiveness, it's choice. Holt nodded slow, the firelight flickering across his face. And you chose it when you came back for us. Mercy looked away. Maybe I was just tired of burying ghosts. The boy set the watch down in the dirt. Then let's leave one here for good. He began digging, small hands carving a hole beneath the firelight. Holt watched quietly, understanding before she did. When the boy covered it again, the earth sighed and the ticking stopped. The morning came with silence. Mercy woke first, the horizon burning red as blood, wind whispering through the grass. The watch was gone, buried for good. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of time pressing behind her eyes. Holt stirred, stretching, and glanced at the spot where Elian slept curled beside his saddle. He's got his father's fire, he said softly. Mercy nodded. And his own way of puttin' it out. Holt chuckled. Boy might grow up to fix this broken world. She looked at him, a rare gentleness in her tone. You think there's still something left to fix? He smiled. Always is. They packed slow, unhurried. No more running, no more ghosts. Mercy paused once, staring east. We could stay, she whispered. Holt looked at her long, then tipped his hat. We could. For the first time since she could remember, her hands didn't shake. The sun caught her hair, turning it to gold. The wind felt soft again, forgiving. Years later, travelers passing through Widow's Bluff would tell stories about a small cabin by the river, smoke rising steady every dawn. They'd say a woman with a scar once lived there, her eyes sharp enough to cut through lies and her heart wide enough to shelter the lost. Beside her, a quiet man with the weight of old sins on his shoulders and a boy who grew tall, fast and fair. Some said they were outlaws who'd gone clean. Others whispered they were ghosts who never left the land. But the truth, if it mattered, was simpler. They were a family born of mercy and time, a new kind of legend the West didn't know how to name. On the hearth inside that cabin, a gold watch sat silent, its hands forever still. Not broken, just resting. The past had stopped counting, and the future had already begun. And somewhere beyond the hills the wind carried a voice, soft, sure and free. We made time stop after all.